It's 2 a.m. again, the kind of hour where the charts go quiet, but the thoughts don't. Where the candles stop printing, but the mind keeps playing back every tick, every entry, every exit, every regret. There's something about the silence after a loss, especially a big one. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And the whisper sounds like your own voice asking one question: what have I done? Tonight's story is personal. Whether it's fiction or memory doesn't matter much. Because if you've ever lost big in the markets, if you've ever had to stare at your own reflection after wiping out weeks, months, years of effort, then you already know this story. Welcome back to the Midnight Trading. If you're new here, this is a place for those late-night reflections where trading psychology meets real life and the charts blur into something deeper. If you find meaning here, consider liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment. We grow by listening to each other. Put on your headphones, dim the lights, and let's begin. I didn't lose $50,000 in a single trade. That would have been cleaner. It was slower than that, a quiet erosion. Like a houseplant dying not from poison, but from forgetting to water it. A little recklessness here, a little overconfidence there. Until one day, I opened my account and realized I was down 50 grand. The strange thing is, it wasn't the number that hit me hardest. It was what the number represented. You see, I didn't come from money. Everything I'd put into that account was carved out of years of saving side jobs and a relentless obsession with making it. Trading wasn't just a financial move for me. It was a story, a declaration, that I was different, that I could outthink the crowd, that I could outwork randomness, that I could escape gravity. But when I stared at that loss, it felt like gravity won. The first emotion wasn't fear, it was shame. Shame that I'd told friends I was close to a breakthrough. Shame that I'd posted screenshots of winning trades like little trophies. Shame that deep down, I knew I'd been lying. Not to them, to myself. That's when I remembered something from Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "More gold has been mined from the thoughts of men than has ever been taken from the earth." At the time I first read that, I'd underlined it in blue ink. I felt powerful when I read it, like I was part of some elite club of thinkers who could will money into existence. But now at 2 in the morning, that quote felt like a mirror I didn't want to look into. Because the truth was, my thoughts weren't gold. They were noise. I'd been chasing momentum like a gambler, relying on emotion over systems, thinking I could force the market to behave because I wanted it more than other people did. But the market doesn't care what you want. It never has. It doesn't care about your dreams, your desperation, your late-night prayers. The market is cold, unfeeling, and brutally honest. In that way, it's the most faithful teacher I've ever met. But the lesson cost me $50,000. What hurt the most wasn't the financial blow. It was realizing how deep I had tied my identity to this idea of being a trader. And when that image cracked, so did I. I stopped eating right, stopped calling people back, stopped going outside. Because if I wasn't the guy who trades, who was I? That's when I pulled the old book back out. The same copy of Think and Grow Rich I had annotated in college. Its spine was cracked, pages dog-eared, but the ideas were still alive. I wasn't sure what I was looking for in those pages. Maybe forgiveness? Maybe clarity, maybe just a distraction from my own thoughts. And then I stumbled on another line buried on a page I'd long forgotten. It said, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit." It felt cruel to read that with a $50,000 hole in my account. But I underlined it anyway, because something inside me whispered, "Don't run from this, learn." I didn't know it yet, but that whisper was the beginning of a different kind of wealth. A quieter one, the kind no chart can show you. It was never about the money. Not really. The money was just the scoreboard. What I was really trading for was self-worth. And until I dealt with that truth, the market was always going to be a dangerous place for me. There's a certain kind of insanity in trading that only those who've lived it understand. It's not the craziness of pressing buy or sell. It's the space between trades. The moments where your plan dissolves into instinct, where risk management bows quietly to hope. That's where I lived for a while. Not in the systems, not in the setups, but in the craving. You wouldn't have known it by looking at my screen. I had all the trappings of a disciplined trader. Color-coded watch lists, economic calendars, price alerts that whispered from my phone like ghosts. But none of it mattered, because deep down I was trading emotion, not assets. And the market, as it always does, sniffed it out. I remember one trade in particular, ETHEA USD. Ethereum had pulled back 30% in a week, and my screen was full of headlines screaming, "Buy the dip." Every influencer I followed was flashing bullish setups. RSI was oversold. Fib levels lined up. Even the volume profile looked textbook. So I went all in, not because of the data, but because of the fantasy of redemption, of making it back in one perfect move, of posting the comeback story on Twitter maybe with some quote from Marcus Aurelius and a candle emoji. I didn't want to admit it, but I was trying to trade my way out of shame. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Desire backed by faith knows no such word as impossible." But what he didn't say, at least not loudly enough for me to hear back then, was this: if your desire is corrupted, your faith becomes delusion. I had desire. Oh, I had oceans of it. But it wasn't clean. It came from the wrong place. It was about revenge, ego, image, and the market punished me for it. ETH didn't bounce. It consolidated, faked a move up, then dropped another 15% in a matter of hours. And with it went a chunk of what remained in my account. It felt surgical, precise, like the market was studying my dreams and shorting them. In those days, I started seeing patterns that weren't there. I became obsessed with one-minute charts. I'd stare at them the way gamblers watch roulette wheels looking for signs in chaos. It wasn't analysis, it was superstition. If I lost 3 in a row, I'd take a walk around the block before the next one. If I won, I'd sit in the same chair, drink from the same mug. I wasn't trading, I was pleading. Somewhere in the middle of that spiral, I started hearing Hill's words differently. He talked about the 6 ghosts of fear. One of them was poverty. Another was criticism. Both haunted me. Poverty, because every trade I placed wasn't backed by strategy anymore, but by the silent terror that I was running out of time. And criticism, because I could hear the imaginary voices of everyone I admired watching me fail. I'd think, what would Jesse Livermore say if he saw me chasing this breakout? What would Paul Tudor Jones say if he saw me risking 20% on a scalp? And then worst of all, what would I say to myself in 5 years, looking back at this version of me? That's when I stopped looking at the market and started looking at myself. What I saw was a man who hadn't made peace with the idea of enough. Enough profit, enough risk, enough validation. I realized I'd been seduced by the most dangerous thing a trader can experience. A winning streak born from luck. You see, early in my journey, I'd made a few big wins, and I mistook those wins for wisdom. That's how the devil gets in. Not with losses, but with false confidence. The devil sells hope in candles and charts. He whispers, "You're smarter than the rest." You see things they don't. And if you're not careful, you start trading like a prophet instead of a participant. I didn't notice the shift when it happened, but I can see it now. I stopped journaling, stopped reviewing trades, stopped caring about position size. Because prophets don't need risk management, they just need faith. Until the market reminds them, you're not a prophet, you're a student. Every trade you place is a test, not of your ability to predict, but of your ability to respond. When I finally saw the 50,000 drawdown in black and white, it didn't feel like one bad decision. It felt like a slow betrayal of everything I'd once promised myself, that I'd be patient, disciplined, detached, but I wasn't. I'd become exactly the kind of trader I used to warn myself about. Not reckless on the outside, but corrupted on the inside. And no strategy can protect you from that. Napoleon Hill didn't talk about trading, but he talked about autosuggestion, the practice of feeding your mind with specific intentional thoughts until they take root. I'd been doing the opposite, feeding my mind junk, scrolling social media for setups, believing strangers who called for pumps, letting fear and greed set the tone of my inner dialogue. When I realized that, I shut everything off. Twitter, Discords, YouTube. I stopped listening to noise and started listening to silence. That's where I first began to hear something else. Not a voice exactly, but a presence. The quiet part of me that remembered why I started. Not for the Lamborghini dreams. Not to flex on people who doubted me, but to learn, to grow, to become the kind of man who could handle uncertainty with grace. The kind of man who didn't need to trade every day to feel valuable. And so I stopped trading. Not forever, just long enough to remember how to think again. The first night I stopped trading felt strange. No charts, no candle formations dancing across my screen, no alarms set for the London Open, just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I slept. Not the broken sleep of a man haunted by numbers, but deep, dreamless sleep, the kind I hadn't felt in months. It was the first clue that I had been more emotionally entangled than I realized. You don't know how much weight you're carrying until you put it down. In those early days off the market, I didn't do much. I sat by the window, drank coffee slowly, wrote in a cheap spiral notebook. I wasn't writing trade plans. I wasn't journaling entries or exits. I was writing fears, regrets, patterns I had noticed in myself. And somewhere in those pages, the shape of the problem began to show. It wasn't just about losing money. It was about losing center. The market hadn't betrayed me. I had betrayed myself by allowing the fear to become my trading partner. Hill had a name for it, the fear of poverty. He didn't mean being broke exactly. He meant the perceived threat of not having enough, of not being secure. It shows up in trades, we force, in profits, we rush in risk, we justify because we feel behind. And it's sneaky because it often wears the mask of ambition. But it's not ambition, it's fear dressed up in hustle culture. Hill wrote that fear is a state of mind, and that one's state of mind is subject to control and direction. At first I scoffed at that. Control your state of mind. Tell that to someone watching a red candle wipe out a week's gain in 10 minutes. But he wasn't wrong, because if fear is a state of mind, then it can be changed, not avoided, managed. So that's what I started doing. Managing the fear, naming it, sitting with it, not pushing it down, not escaping it with another trade. I'd stare at my screen with the charts closed, and I'd ask myself, if you don't trade today, what do you feel? And the answers came like waves. I feel useless. I feel like I'm wasting time. I feel like I'm losing my edge. That's when I realized I had wired my entire sense of worth into the act of doing. Not growing, not learning, just doing. That's not trading. That's compulsion. So I did something radical for me, at least. I deleted my brokerage app off my phone, moved my trading capital into a separate cold wallet, made it difficult to access friction by design. I needed distance, time to build emotional muscle. Because here's the truth. Fear doesn't just show up when we're losing. Sometimes it's loudest when we're winning. Fear of giving it back. Fear of it being a fluke. Fear that we don't actually know what we're doing and we just got lucky. And when you're in that state, you make decisions from anxiety, not strategy. You overtrade. You undersize when you should size up. You size up when you should sit out. And all the while, fear keeps feeding you lies. If you stop, you'll fall behind. If you don't take this trade, someone else will. But trading isn't a race. It's a mirror. The market doesn't test your intelligence. It tests your capacity to stay sane under pressure. And I wasn't sane. I was tired, wired, shaky from too much caffeine and not enough clarity. So I gave myself permission to stop. That's when I really started hearing Napoleon Hill again. Not the Instagram version, not the hustler quote cards. The real Hill. The man who said that definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. And I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to in months. Why am I trading at all? The silence that followed was heavy, because the real answer wasn't noble. It wasn't about building generational wealth, or mastering a craft, or challenging myself. It was about fear. Fear of being average. Fear of being left behind. Fear that the corporate world had a ceiling, and this chaotic digital battlefield was the only way out. But fear can't build anything sustainable. Not in life, not in markets. So I started rebuilding from the ground up. First, I revisited my trading journal. Not to log trades, to log mindset. Each morning, I'd write one paragraph, how I felt, what I feared, what I was hoping to happen. Then I'd walk away from the screen. No charts, no setups, just observation. That practice alone began shifting something inside me. I started noticing patterns in my psychology. Days I felt off. Days I felt sharp. Days I was trading out of boredom. And slowly I began to reclaim control. Not of the market, but of myself. And once that started, everything began to change. Risk didn't feel like fear anymore, it felt like math. Losing trades didn't feel like threats, they felt like data. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt like space to breathe. And the market? It didn't feel like a god anymore, it felt like a mirror, showing me exactly what I brought to it. No more, no less, and that's where the real work began. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after you've lost a lot of money. Not right away. First comes the panic, then the bargaining, then the silence. But eventually, if you let it, peace shows up. Not because you've recovered what was lost, but because you've finally let go of needing to win every time. That's where I found myself. Not at the top of my game, but at the bottom of my ego. And from that vantage point, everything looked different. I started to see trading less like a battlefield and more like a chessboard. Each move mattered, yes, but what really counted was how many moves you could make before the game was over. Longevity. That's the game. And I realized I'd been playing like I only had a few turns left. Every trade was life or death. Every red candle a threat to my identity. Every green candle a fix for a deeper wound. But when I zoomed out, I saw it clearly. This wasn't a war. It was a marathon, and I'd been sprinting on fumes. That's when I built what I now call the silent framework. It's not a strategy, not a system with indicators and entry rules. It's a mindset scaffold, a set of quiet rules that sit beneath every decision I make. Rules born not from books but from scars. The first one, if you feel rushed, pause. Rushed trades are rarely rational. They're reactive. Born from the fear of missing out, not from clarity. FOMO isn't just a trader's disease. It's a psychological rot. It tells you that if you don't act now, the world will leave you behind. But the truth, there will always be another trade. What there won't always be is your capital or your peace. The second rule, trade only what you understand and accept. Not just technical setups, emotional setups. Ask yourself, what emotion is driving this trade? Greed, fear, proving something. Then pause, because the market doesn't just price in data. It prices in psychology. And if you don't understand yours, you're trading blind. The third rule, define enough. This one nearly broke me. Because enough sounds like a limit, but really it's a compass. If you don't define it, you'll chase forever. No amount will satisfy an undefined appetite. I used to think 10K a month was the dream. Then it became 20K. Then I wanted a six-figure month just once, to prove I could. But prove to who? Nobody was watching. And even if they were, would that trade make me a better man? A better friend? A better son? No, it would just be another candle. The final rule, take losses with gratitude. This one came last, because for a long time, every loss felt like a personal attack. But the market doesn't know you. It doesn't care. And once I accepted that, I realized something profound. Losses are tuition. They are payment for the education of mastery. Not always fair, not always timely, but always valuable if you reflect. And reflection became the heartbeat of my routine. I journal even when I didn't trade. Because not trading is a decision, too. One that deserves documentation. I began studying my mind like I once studied charts. Patterns of impulse, triggers of overconfidence, signs of clarity. And slowly, without noticing exactly when it changed me, not just as a trader, but as a person, I stopped checking charts in the middle of dinner. Stopped obsessing over CPI numbers like they were gospel. Stopped comparing my path to strangers on social media, posting P&L screenshots with Lamborghinis in the background. Because here's the realest thing Napoleon Hill ever taught me. You become what you think about most. And I had been thinking about winning. Constantly, endlessly, desperately, but never about becoming. Now, I think about becoming a man of patience, a trader of discipline, a person who can sit with uncertainty without needing to escape it. And my results, strangely, they improved. Not because I got smarter, but because I got quieter. Less noise, more signal. Less rush, more rhythm. I didn't need 10 trades a day to feel productive. I just needed one good decision. Because one good decision repeated over time compounds. And that's something most traders forget. The real edge isn't some secret indicator. It's consistency. Emotional, psychological, strategic consistency. The kind of consistency that builds over years, not weeks. The kind of consistency that survives drawdowns, not just celebrates rallies. And the thing that fuels it, self-respect. That's what I was missing in the early days. I had knowledge, I had tools, I even had experience. But I didn't respect myself enough to follow my own rules. And without self-respect, discipline is a costume. You wear it when it's convenient, but you take it off the second pressure shows up. Now, I don't trade to win. I trade to stay in the game, to live another round, to grow a little deeper, to strengthen the muscles of patience and clarity. It's not sexy, it's not fast, but it's sustainable. And in this game, that's everything. The first time I came back to the market, after the loss, the silence, the reframe, I approached it like a conversation, not a conquest. I opened the chart with no expectation, no setup in mind, just observation. What's the story here? What's the market trying to say? Not what do I want it to say, but what is actually unfolding. That small shift changed everything. Because before I used to look for confirmation of my own beliefs. Now I look for disconfirmation. I look for tension, for hesitation, for places where the story doesn't add up. That's where the real edge lives. Napoleon Hill once said, "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit." It sounds noble, even romantic, but I didn't find the benefit in that $50,000 loss overnight. I found it slowly, in layers, through discomfort, reflection, and recalibration. It taught me that real traders don't just master the market, they master themselves. And that's the hardest thing to do. Because mastering yourself means confronting every insecurity the market will inevitably surface. Fear of not being enough, fear of being wrong, fear of missing out, fear of being left behind. It's all in there. And the more capital you have, the louder the volume gets. That's why trading isn't just a profession, it's a path, a psychological dojo. Every candle is a question. Every price movement, a test. Can you hold your ground? Can you stay centered when the world tilts? You won't always pass. I don't. There are still days when I feel the urge to force a trade. Still days when I confuse activity with progress. Still moments when I see someone else's win online and think, why not me? But now I have tools. I have silence. I have a process that starts not with charts, but with breath. Before I trade, I ask 3 questions. How do I feel right now? What am I hoping the market will do? What will I do if it does the opposite? That's it. No indicators, no complex spreadsheets, just awareness. Because most bad trades don't come from a lack of strategy. They come from a lack of presence. And when you're not present, you're reactive. And when you're reactive, you give your edge away. Quietly, subtly, repeatedly, until you're left wondering how it all slipped through your fingers. I don't wonder anymore. I know exactly how it slipped away. It wasn't the setup. It wasn't the market. It wasn't bad luck. It was me. And that's the most freeing realization of all. Because if I was the problem, I could also be the solution. That's the legacy Napoleon Hill left behind, not just the power of thought, but the responsibility of it. You are the architect of your beliefs, and your beliefs shape your trades more than any chart ever will. So now when I sit down to trade, it's with humility, not because I'm afraid of losing, but because I respect the craft. I respect the risk. And most of all, I respect the quiet voice inside that says, "This isn't about the money, it's about mastery. It's about walking into chaos with composure, about making peace with impermanence, about showing up day after day, not to conquer the market, but to understand yourself through it." And that's worth more than any green candle. Because in the end, I didn't just recover the $50,000 I lost. I gained something bigger. I gained clarity, discipline, self-trust, and the realization that trading is not a shortcut to freedom. It is the journey to freedom, but only if you walk it consciously. So take a breath, zoom out, ask yourself not what you can extract from the market, but who you're becoming by stepping into it. That's where the real profit lives, not in the wins, but in the becoming. If you're still here listening in the quiet, thank you. Not just for your time, but for your attention. This story wasn't really about me. It was about all of us. Because whether you've lost $500 or $50,000, the emotional terrain is the same. We all battle fear. We all face doubt. We all wonder if we're cut out for this. And the truth is, you are. But not because you always win. Because you're willing to learn from the times you don't. That's what sets real traders apart. Not bravado, not flashy wins, but resilience, the quiet discipline of showing up, of refining, of pausing when it's easier to push. So wherever you are on your journey, whether you're just starting or rebuilding after a loss, know this: you're not alone. Every candle you've studied, every journal you've written, every sleepless night you've spent questioning it all. It matters. It builds something inside you. Patience, perspective, strength. That's the real wealth, the kind that can't be charted, only earned through time and trials and truth. So take what you need from this story, leave what doesn't serve you. And if you felt anything tonight, drop a comment below. Have you ever felt like this character? What's your biggest obstacle in this journey? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, success begins in silence.